Hi, it's Shira Adler. Welcome back to another episode of The Synergy Show, and specifically an episode dedicated to one of my absolute favorite subjects, wellness. But not the wellness inside and on the body, the wellness in our built environments, the wellness in our general natural environment. And I'm very honored to have yet another very old, he's not old, I mean, it's been a few years since I've known this gentleman. He's an old colleague and a friend and one of the pioneers in the hemp industries. If you have never heard of this man before, well, you will after today's episode. It is with great honor and pleasure I introduce the wonderful Andrew Bish from Bish Enterprises out in the middle of a very small town that I never remember the name of in the middle of Nebraska. Is that right?
Giltner. Yep, Giltner, Nebraska.
I
Town,
love
a big city of 400 people.
What's so funny about that is actually in the hemp industries, you are one of the, we would say, big macher, like the big man on campus. You're one of our leaders. So your reputation in our hemp industries is rather big, but you're coming from a very small town. And I love that. And I think it actually speaks to one of the coolest attributes of our entire industries. You can be a Midwest farmer. You can be a homesteader in upstate New York. You can be anyone from anywhere in this beautiful country of ours and still become a significant part of the ecosystem that is hemp. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about what are Bish Enterprises?
Okay. Well, we're a family-owned company. We've been around since 1976, so this is our 50th anniversary. My grandfather started the company, and my mother and father own the company today, and I run the day-to-day operations. We're focused on custom agricultural design, mainly in the harvesting space. People come to us oftentimes with unique ideas, and we work to flush those out. So we go all the way from sometimes ideation through end product. We have a team of engineers, fabricators, shippers, sales team members, office team members, all sorts of team members here in this little tiny town, creating quite a wide array of agricultural implements.
So interestingly, you're really just a Midwest farm family. I mean, your background is really, really from the traditional roots of where most of the agricultural commodities had to be born. They were born in a farm. They were born with an idea from a family member that grew it and passed it on. But how did you specifically go then into hemp? Because you're a leader in this industry. So what was the trajectory that got you into this part of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, I'm from a family of farmers, and we're literally on what we call a pivot corner out here in central Nebraska. We have irrigation, and they have pivots, and the place the pivot doesn't reach is called the corner. And we have 5 acres of property here, two different 5 acre properties that we happen to be on my grandfather's original farmland. So it couldn't be any more surrounded by farmers. I didn't mean to get into the hemp industry, to be completely honest. That was not my objective the day I picked up the phone and had a customer of ours that was contracted to harvest almost 200 acres of grain in Colorado into 2016 and wanted a better harvesting solution than what they had, and thought that one of our products that we built for the sorghum industry might very well work for that application. And that was my start to the hemp industry, was harvesting 200 acres of hemp for grain in a little town called Marshall, Colorado.
I love that. But what I really love about it is that it speaks to, I think, the heartland of America, because what you're talking about is taking an existing commodity or a yield, a crop, and saying, we haven't done this before, but it should be the same as, and I'm going to create a solution then to bridge into a different kind of crop. And so, how successful were you? And where did you go from that initial solution creation? Because now you're kind of the go-to guy for anything to do with building from 3D design to conception to delivery to all of that. So you sort of took a big jump between that first job to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it worked well. So that was exciting. that was probably our first mistake, is that it worked well, and we decided to continue on in the hemp industry. No, it's not a mistake at all. What I realized in doing that was there was simply not very many people working to help some of these farmers that were growing hemp.
Yeah.
My anticipation was that if this particular farmer was doing it, we're likely to see other farmers doing it. Our business is focused on niche crops, custom solutions. And so we learned a lot that day. We made some changes to the header. Year two was a better year for us. But it was is really this idea that we could fit into helping the hemp farmer because I couldn't find anyone else that was doing it. Again, being from a family of farmers, I like to help farmers. I like to solve problems. I think I'm a good problem solver. So hemp had even today has nearly limitless amounts of problems. And so what we do really fits into that category.
It's a little bit of the if you build it, they shall come kind of experience. I'm the same way, by the way. That's exactly, and I always say that necessity is the motherhood of invention. While you're looking at the mother, I invented my first product series, a first in class wellness product. I wrote the book to answer the questions because I lived it. So you really came from the lived experience. You created a solution, you built equipment designated specifically for that agricultural commodity. So now here's a question. With all the years now that you have under your belt in this, what is the largest misconception that still exists in terms of industrial hemp, let's say, because that's really your focus as a crop?
Yeah, well, what's the largest misconception? I mean, we still get the jokes. I mean, the running joke is that hemp is marijuana, right? And then if we harvest it, we're going to get high in the combine.
You still get
Oh,
that? People really still
oh,
think that?
I don't know that they think it, but they definitely joke about it.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure that most of the people that are joking about it don't believe that, but they think they're funny. And I'm pretty confident they think I've never heard it before. So I still get that type of joke from farm. Just to give you an example, my grandfather passed away last year. He's 88 years old, and all the way up till the end of his life, when he'd joke around with me and he'd say, "When are we going to start growing that marijuana?" And so that's the running joke. That's the misconception. It's not mainstream yet. So there isn't so much hemp in the marketplace that from a consumer standpoint, it's actually that distinguishable in terms of what the product is. That'd be the biggest misconception. And we run against that constantly. Without getting into the weeds, and I'm sure you'll ask me questions about that later, I'm heavily involved in policy and politics, and cannabinoids often dominates the conversation on industrial hemp. So
Right.
just that's the misconception, is that it's grown for purposes different than what it's being grown for.
Yeah, I still get that too, but that's why I wrote the book. So next time you get one of those jokes and you have to laugh and say, ha, 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 I've never heard that one before, just refer them to your buddy Shira's book. Say, there's a really good book on Amazon, The ABCs of CBD. And it's more than CBD. The whole second chapter is especially in this country, but the entire global history of cannabis and hemp, because people don't know what they don't know. And you're
Yeah.
still out there having kind of the same conversation on that level. But on the other hand, you're also growing like gangbusters, and that's pretty encouraging and exciting. I remember seeing you at a conference. I don't even remember what state it was, where you were talking about the advancing. And yes, the policy is very important, but you're still physically on the farm. You're still building machinery. You're still speaking to farmers. And there are more and more farmers. There are more and more people interested in various industry sectors of learning how they can be a part of this world and how you can help them fit into that world. So, are you finding that you've created a new lane for yourself in those conversations between policy and farming? Because I expect that, I mean, I know you across different segments of this, but now with the reputation growing, Bish Enterprises is kind of big. So,
Yeah,
have you
well,
found?
we were really one of the first manufacturers of any hemp equipment, and I think we're the only people that have stuck around in this particular space. So we do have some longevity, which is good. I mean, 10 years under our belt isn't a long time, but it's more than It's more than most. You couple that with the previous 40 years of my grandfather and my father. We've got a lot of agricultural experience. Yeah, I mean, I definitely am well known in this space, and I think it's helped us out quite a bit with some of our other niche crops. People look at what we do and then they say, well, they're willing to try things other people aren't willing to try, and they come to us for other crops that they're looking at producing and oftentimes check with us on interest levels that we might have. And honestly, I'm usually interested if it's complex
Hmm.
and it's going to be something that could provide a positive impact for a producer. I have a hard time saying no to those types of projects.
Sure, because it's exciting. It's a new terrain. So speaking of, what are some of the new products then, or what are some of the more recent inquiries that you get that you find could be considerably worth your time? I'm curious what's happening out because that is a segment I am unfamiliar with. So,
Yeah, like I mentioned, we work with a lot of niche crops. So I get people that are looking at developing out solutions. For instance, wild rice. We've been in a wild rice project for 5 years
hmm,
that has been quite extensive and quite challenging and taught me a lot. And there's aspects that coming from the hemp space that I've been able to apply to that crop and vice versa. So that works out really well. We've worked with crops like ginseng, hops, sunflower, sorghum, and then of course some of the more traditional crops, but trying to find maybe better ways to do that. We also do a lot of work in the research space.
hmm,
So we work with large agricultural companies, grain producers, genetics producers rather, and make some smaller equipment, smaller headers, harvesters, specifically designed for genetic research purposes. So that's been a good space for us as well. And then a few years ago, we, as a result of our work in the hemp space, we even developed out a research scale decortication system that we have in over 10 different universities and post-secondary institutions around the country that's used to measure and quantify different varieties of hemp, helping to understand how much fiber versus herd a particular genetic has, as well as how much energy consumption is used to process different types of industrial hemp varieties.
so you're really involved in more than obviously just the growing. I think the research is one of the most important and fastest growing sectors, especially for enviroeconomics and things of that nature, because this is really where we can start to uh, make a larger imprint, not just in what we're doing here in the United States, but also for global partnerships. But I am curious, if you had to identify, what would you say is the greatest bottleneck then just here in the US in terms of hemp processing? Where do you see something that you'd still like to help be a part of smoothing out or making it easier and inviting more people into that conversation?
Well, I think our biggest bottleneck in hemp processing is actually offtake. And I don't mean that there's not offtake, although we
Mm,
definitely need more offtake. But the way the hemp industry has worked, especially with equipment, is backwards. A typical industry has a market pull, and then you design equipment around developing that end product. So you start from the end and work that the other
mhm.
direction. The hemp industry has been tough because it actually started backwards. It started with the front of we're going to grow this and then we'll figure out what to do with it. So from an
Right.
equipment manufacturer standpoint, I've had a heck of a time trying to keep up with where the market is going, and I can't tell you how many products I've developed that'll just never see the light of day. And that's okay. I mean, it definitely hasn't helped our revenue situation. With that being said, if we had consistent offtake in the marketplace, it would be a lot easier for processors to gear their equipment in a
Mhm.
particular direction. And they just can't do that right now. If you look at most of the hemp processing that's going on in the United States, the decortication facilities, they're trying to produce a quality fiber product, a quality herd product. They're trying to produce that herd in various sizes. They're trying to produce that fiber in various qualities.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to do. They have to carry a lot of different SKUs And what's the customer? Well, the customer one day might not be the customer the next day. And while they need to be flexible, they also need to know where the bulk of their revenue is going to come from. And I would say that at this point in time, processors don't always know the answer to that.
Sure, it doesn't help that we're in an industry with consistently shifting regulatory landscape sands, if you will. So just when you think you've got it together, someone changes a rule and we're like, oh, all right, we'll address that now. And so what do you think it'll take then for the US to really build true regional hemp processing hubs? Because if we had a more orchestrated or specific way of referring our industry to from point A to point B to point C, that would certainly be beneficial. But what do you think it would take to do that?
Well, we're in a weird point actually in the industrial space, and I don't think the industrial space is plagued with the same regulatory problems as the floral space.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but if we want regional hubs, we want more processing. We've got to get over this hump to where we have enough material in the marketplace for the amount of offtake opportunity that is out there. There are some large industries that really would like to bring hemp into the fold. You look at automobile manufacturing, you look
Right.
at aircraft manufacturing, building manufacturing. Regardless of how much supply that we have in the United States, we cannot touch those markets because we don't have enough supply. So a lot of people look at this and they say, well, there's not enough demand in the marketplace for hemp. And that's partially true because what the processors are trying to meet for demand right now is some of the easier products that don't require that level of infrastructure, hemp bedding, absorbent materials, even hempcrete. You can build some of these product lines out. But when you start getting into these larger supply needs, again, automobile, airplane manufacturing, commercial construction, you just have to have more supply. So we're going to grow a little bit slowly, and there's an inflection point that we're going to hit where these contracts are achieved, and that's when we're going to start to see more and more of these facilities start to pick up.
I deeply appreciate that because you just mentioned something that I think a lot of people who might be watching this at any point say, wait, he just mentioned hemp, aeronautics, aviation, automotive industries. I mean, of course, let's not forget we can make batteries, and there's the energy sector. This is a global industry in terms of the applications. And I wrote about that in the book too. There are over 40,000 applications, technically speaking, for all the various cultivars and components of what hemp can grow, depending on where you're growing it and what you're growing it for and what you want the end product to be. But I'll bet you there are people that just heard you and said, what? We can build what out of hemp? And the fact is, yes. And before we get into all those huge, beautiful, expansive, really big money and really big industries, biofuels, bioplastics, all of that, there's also something very grounded that you are really passionate about. And again, kind of a leader in animal feed. Why is nobody really talking about that? Well, we are today, and that's why I have you on. But I really want to hear your perspectives. And why do you care so much about that?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons we don't talk a lot about animal feed is that people just don't understand that it's a problem. People look at hemp grain and they think, well, hemp grain must be legal. And hemp grain can't get you high. Hemp grain doesn't have any cannabinoids. But they don't realize that this problem started in 1958 with a feed additive petition and a term called grass status, which is generally recognized as safe, which was
Right.
coined at that period of time. And hemp was in prohibition. So hemp did not make it on the list of generally recognized as safe items. And so it's not into the animal marketplace. So what my passion is, you look at what we do with the Hemp Feed Coalition and you think, well, he must be, passionate about animals and passionate about nutrition. And I like animals and I like nutrition, but that's not my passion. It's the lowest hanging fruit out there. If we want to change the economics of the hemp industry, we need an animal feed offtake opportunity. You look at
Right.
98 million acres of corn are produced every single year. Most of that goes directly into animal feed. That's how the corn industry survives. That is how the soybean industry survives. That is how wheat survives. I mean, yeah, people make bread with wheat, but we're not making so much bread that's
No,
what.
we're not making so much bread, and that
Oh,
actually opens another conversation in terms of GMOs because those some of the products you mentioned are connected to that. You're talking
yeah.
about something entirely different. Why are we not growing that quantity? So keep going.
Yeah.
This is really
So
significant.
I look at it as that's the door opener. It's an easy item. Hemp grain requires very, very little processing. So there's very little cost involved in doing it. And if we can open up the animal marketplace to that, what we're going to see is we're going to start to see a reduction in costs across the entire supply chain for hemp
Right.
because there is the natural byproduct of grain production, which is stalks. There are many places. Look, there's places that grow grain that they can't get a lot of stock material back off that field because they don't have a lot of water to begin with. And then there's places that they can still get a ton or maybe 2 ton per acre of stock material after a grain harvest. The major
Stalk, STALK.
correct. The
Yes.
current major drivers are going to be hemp hurd.
Wow.
Hemp grown for grain production tends to produce more hurd than purpose grown hemp that's produced for fiber production. So that's actually going to reduce the cost of hurd production, which would drive down decortication costs to processors. So we'd actually see a cost reduction in the entire marketplace if we could open up the animal feed sector. And then that doesn't even touch some of the nutritional benefits that humans would receive and animals would receive
Right.
by moving hemp grain into the ration of an animal feed.
Absolutely. I mean, you are what you eat. And depending on the culture and the educational background, even the religious background, there are reasons that we have dietary restrictions, we have the guidelines. Do you think that with the current new, and I'm personally very grateful for this, the new MAHA initiatives about flipping that food pyramid upside down finally and getting right what was sort of innate and natural and restoring that understanding? How do you see hemp feed and grain feeding into that new model? And I like, even though it's new, it's really old. It's really the most innate levels of how we're supposed to be eating ourselves and through our animals. Do you see
Yeah,
an opportunity for that in that window?
yeah. I think what's unique about hemp, however, is that it somewhat transcends politics in terms of protein quantity because it really doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. The same
Right.
amount of protein exists inside that hemp seed either direction. So the nutrition density, looking at some of the omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid ratios that are in hemp, the fact that it's got lutein, there's a number of other health benefits to eating hemp seed. I think that it's getting looked at regardless of politics because it just starts to make sense. We've got to increase protein per acre in the United States, and hemp is one of the ways that you can do that.
That's a beautiful phrase. I think that should become a bumper sticker, in all honesty. I'm definitely going to title one of the chapters, have that in big quotes. Andrew said so. No, but I really love that. And so, from your work with then another question from the industry associations, what policies do we need to create then that will be most critical for that statement becoming more obvious and evident and experienced?
Well, policy is just, I would say that the government's in its own way at this point. We need less regulation in terms of less regulatory barriers from hemp seed becoming a feed ingredient. Right now, in order to get these approvals, we have to go through the same process that you might go through if you were producing a synthetic feed ingredient. The process just simply was never designed for a naturally occurring grain. Um, and so, but because that's the process that exists, that's the process we need to go through at this point. Now, legislatively, there could be some changes that could help ease that. There's really no reason that we couldn't put legislation on the book that immediately declares grass status for non-consumption animals, for instance. So there's really no risk to any humans to feed hemp seed meal to a dog for instance, or a horse. I mean, we're just not eating dogs and horses in the United States. Why not allow those animals to participate in this feed product? So there are some legislative things that I think that we could do. I think it's worthwhile to go through some of the FDA safety checks on hemp seed meal, hemp seed hulls, hemp seed oil for animals that are going to go into the stream of commerce for human consumption. Uh,
Hmm.
Mainly because I think it's worthwhile to give confidence to consumers, and the data that we have is good. Like it's great to say, hemp is healthy and hemp can do all these things, but it's
Yeah.
also really handy to give consumers an actual scientific fact sheet that says this is why we say that, and we
Right. In the
that
same way, essential oils, the terpenes, whether you call them, depending on what industry you're in, whether it's a holistic mom or someone in the canna industry, you're referring to the same kind of compounds with two aspects of language. But the fact is, we all know that terpenes are incredibly healthy for you. We all know on that common sense level, essential oils are incredibly stabilizing and wonderful on that emotional, spiritual, mental side of what it is in our physiology and our biochemistry. So we have to go from the common sense attributes. You can go to the store right now and buy a bag of hemp seeds and dump it in a smoothie. And if that's natural to you, you're aware. But for the people that are not aware, again, we're trying to traverse a little bit of a gap of education, understanding, common sense, critical thinking. So if you had 5 minutes with federal leadership, what would you just want them to understand simply? How easy could it really be to flip that switch and say, it doesn't matter who is in office right now, because it really doesn't. It's just about bringing common sense information to them. So, what would we say? Flip the switch on putting hemp back as a GRAS, making it grass, understanding that it can't really negatively impact anybody? Or
Well,
would it be,
that would be my ask. I mean, that it's not been an ask that's been received uh, to the degree that I'd like it to yet. Although it's not an ask that I get a lot of pushback from either. So
Mhm.
that's what I'd ask regulators is just to help speed this along and ask the FDA to relabel this as a grass status item.
Yeah.
That would be the short answer
It
of
supports regulatory, it actually supports regenerative ag in terms of just it supports farmers, it supports it. I mean, there's so many ancillary benefits to doing something that simply, and it is kind of that simple. So, I mean,
correct.
I'm all for it. I'm a huge fan of yours. I'll be out there doing what I can again in the second book. That will be the next in the ABC's trilogy. It's focused on agritech. And this is agritech. This
Yeah,
is
and
also fundamental, but it's also the future.
yeah, and I think if we were to able to do something like that, we would see industry pick up and start identifying what the public benefits are and selling those, because then they have a financial interest in doing so. And
Right.
that's what we struggle with right now, is if we don't have that clear regulatory pathway that makes it easy for people to make a product and make revenue on it, they're going to wait until it becomes easy. And that's what we're waiting for.
Yeah. So then, if that's also the case, obviously we're going to need a next generation of skilled worker and policy advisors. So, what do you think the skills for the next generation of hemp workers need most?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Hmm, nobody's ever asked me that question before. Well, I mean, the reality is, if we're talking about grain, I think grain already fits into almost every single process that we work with other grains on right now. So that skill set won't really change. We'll probably see some more automation come into that space to reduce some of the manual labor. I think, we need more inventors in this space is what we need. We need more. If I were to ask for something, it'd be people that are finding offtake opportunities by creating products. That's what we could really use, and what I think the biggest gap right now is in terms of getting hemp into the marketplace is finding enough different products that can help increase some of the production while we're working on building enough supply to start reaching some of those other industries, because there is a gap and we do have to fill that. We can't go from zero to we're supplying,
Yeah.
500,000 acres to an automotive company, there's got to be something that's helping that processor get from that 1,000 acre to the 10,000 acre to the 50,000 acre to the 500,000 acre mark. And it's going to
Mhm.
be people coming up with unique product offtake opportunities.
Well, and in order to do that, I mean, I'm actually starting to do more guest lectures again. It's taken us a few years to be in the space where we can travel and talk and go share and teach. It really is about offering. That's why I'm doing this edutainment series with people like you. But we really do, I think, need universities and trade schools to be building dedicated hemp and biomaterials educational tracks and licensing opportunities and collaborative partnerships, right? So there aren't that many schools. What would you like to see if you were in charge of that next phase of rolling out those programs? What would you want a core program to look like?
Well, I actually think there are a lot of schools working on this. I think that we don't hear about it very often. I mean, there's quite a few schools working on, for instance, a plot trials this year. They've been working together, collaborating. I think there's 13 different universities, if not more, working on breeding or looking at plots with specific varieties in different areas of the country. We at the Hemp Feed Coalition started a webinar series to expose current scientific studies because we identified that there's quite a few scientific studies going on out there regarding hemp as animal feed ingredients. When I was in North Carolina this last year for the Fiber Summit, I was
I
blown
saw you
away.
at that's right. That's when I
Yeah.
recently bumped into you again. That was great. The Global Industrial Textile Hemp Summit thing,
I was
big name,
blown away at the amount of research being done on textiles. And the
right?
reality is, I mean, we're just not going to rebuild the textile industry in the United States, at least in my opinion. Regardless, I ran into 20 people working on 20 different research projects regarding textiles. So
I
I think
think we are. I'm part
I,
of that group.
I think we do have a lot of research going on. I don't think it's as consolidated, and
Right.
I don't think we're always moving in the directions of finding out the easy answers. Like textiles, for instance. I'm excited when people make textiles. I just think that there's a lot of complicated infrastructure that has to be set up there. And so should we not research it? Are there some easier offtake opportunities that we're not putting any money into researching? Absolutely. And so I would like to see where some of these more simplistic offtake opportunity products, like absorbent materials,
Right.
just heavier research on absorbent materials and information being spread about the potential of hemp as an absorbent material. Again, it's super easy to create. There's huge offtake opportunities, but there's just very little scientific data out there that's
Yeah.
causing companies to say, yeah, let's take this on in this
There
capacity.
are a few, and you're right, there are about 13 or so, universities that we sort of probably already know. I think there can be a lot more. I think in terms of where we can have more cooperative and inter-educational components and research that benefit, like you said, if we grew more acreage for the hemp feed and we started with these animals, it becomes part of the regenerative agriculture movement. It has, by its nature, an evolutionary process. Because you're right, also, and I always say this, my late father used to say this, a study is only as good as the money behind it, right? It's going to be skewed, it's going to look for certain things, it's going to present the scientific parameters for what it wants to try to accomplish, and it hopes that it will show that. So not to say that we don't want to keep trying. Of course, we want to try. We just want to be practical about understanding that. And the fact is, more white papers, more studies, more research simply corroborates what most of us who are in these industries have long known and felt passionate about. So, maybe a final question. In 5 to 10 years, what does a thriving US whole ecosystem look like to you?
So in 5 years, we're going to be a little bit further on than we are. What I would say is a thriving market is consistent growth. If we could, as an industry, start to achieve 25 to 50% year over year growth in terms of acres produced and offtake sold, that would be a success, in my opinion. That it is a realistic target. It is manageable. It allows for facility build out. There's a lot of little pieces logistically that have to be sorted out that go well beyond hemp. Transportation costs,
Mhm.
location, access to material. All those things are very, very important. And I think that if we're in 5 years from now have solved some of those things, we're on the right path. I look at it a lot like the trajectory of soybeans that was introduced early on in the 20th century, but really didn't gain traction in the United States to any degree until the 50s, and then massive production did not really start to tick up until you got into the 60s and 70s. We can shortcut that in the hemp space, but there are all of those infrastructure points that need to be built out. So if we're continuing to move up, like I said, 25, 50% on a per year basis, I would say that we're moving in the right direction, and hemp will then become a successful commodity.
If hemp truly scales, then what sector do you think will have the biggest impact? Because there's so many that we can touch.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think hemp and a lot of the research behind that has the potential to really reduce a lot of our petroleum plastics. So I think that's going to be a big sector. I do think the absorbent industry is going to be a very, very big sector. Building materials is probably going to be the largest sector that from the stock material standpoint, building materials,
Right.
including like insulation products,
Yep. Yep.
companies like Hempetecture that are doing things like that.
Yeah, I just interviewed Cameron from Americhamp, and Hempatexture's on my list, and those guys are amazing. There aren't that many companies out there, but that's a big focus, at least. So Eco Synergy. If anyone wants to find me, Dot Solutions is the website. We are really focusing on the regenerative building materials, the sustainability. I just want to be a hub for getting people to ask me questions, to lead them to you if they need the equipment and deeper understanding. But I love those guys. And I think it's such a sexy, cool thing, the whole sector of building materials. And wow, we can do so much right now. I mean, that's the good thing about that industry. Doesn't even really need a lot to scale. We need more people to know about you, what you do, what they do, but the materials are there. They are available at this moment, and
yeah,
that's
and
pretty
I
exciting.
Yeah, and I think that really companies that are getting these into the hands of these products into the hands of consumers are really doing the most to help this industry right now. And I think of companies like I&D Hemp that have created a wide array of consumer products and found an audience in quite a few stores throughout the United States that are helping to normalize this. And if we have more companies, again, just thinking of how can we get a product into the hands of the consumer. Consumers like hemp products. They'll continue to adopt them at a higher and higher rate, but we got to get them into their hands.
Absolutely, really do. So, what motivates you most then, just on a personal level, because it is such a complex and evolving industry? What is your strongest motivation? And if you had, let's say, the thousands and thousands of people that will eventually watch this interview, if you wanted them to take away one thing from what you're offering and what you're teaching and what you're doing, what would it be?
Well, my motivation and what is most interesting to me, honestly, isn't hemp at all. I look at hemp as a vehicle to solve a rotational crop problem that we have in the United States. We have a lot of dirty soil. And
Yeah.
I'm lucky to live in a town of 400 people where I have very few neighbors. But we have some of the dirtiest air in the entire planet twice a year during tillage season and then during harvest season, where all these chemicals, these heavy metals are getting kicked up. I can't
Yeah.
breathe during those times. I've got children. I want my children to not develop cancer from some of these chemicals. I would like them to live a long life. I'd like their children to live a long life. I would like United States agriculture to be able to survive and thrive because we rebuild our soil microbiome, and
Mhm.
we have to have alternative crops in and for a rotational for farmers for that to happen. We can't just push down on farmers and say you have to change your practices. Farmers have to have an alternative to go to. You can't just grow tomatoes in central Nebraska because you say, well, you need to grow something different. Things just don't always work in certain places. But hemp is unique in the way that it has the ability, because of all the different genetics, to be able to go into a lot of different latitudes, into a lot of different regions, a lot of different microclimates, and be a successful rotational crop. And that's what excites me, is that we can clean up these soils, we can provide a better
Yeah.
future for our children.
I love that so very much. It's part of the reason I love you so very much. That was the most perfect answer. With really everybody we know in the hemp industries, we come from our heart first. We come from a true dedication and passion to simply improving the lives of the people we love and the land that we live on. And I love that. So I thank you very much for your time and also for your shout out to your brother, who hopefully I'll get him for an interview next. That would be really a lot of fun because he's now left the family business and he's working with one of our dear colleagues in upstate New York, Professor Larry Smart, on genetics and doing some great work up there. So please let him know I'll be calling him for an interview next. And I'm just so grateful to you, your family, everything about you guys. So,
Well,
Andrew
thank you,
Bish.
Shira, for letting me talk a little bit about what we're doing out here in Giltner, Nebraska, and what we do at the Hemp Feed Coalition.
And I will have all the links and descriptions in the box below. Remember to like, subscribe, share this video, and let's keep sharing these stories. And that's where we'll make the impact for our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you.